The second benchmark for probability is to identify independent events and calculate their probabilities. An independent event, two events are independent if they don't depend on each other. It's kind of obvious, but the outcome of one event does not depend on another event. So for example, if you have two coins and you toss them, and I want to know what is the probability of them both being heads. Well, the way you calculate probability is you calculate out, first you list all the possible outcomes, or the sample space. So what are all my possible outcomes? Well, I could toss tails and then heads. I could do tail and then another tail. I could do heads and then tail, or I could do heads and heads. Those are all my possibilities. Because they're independent events, it doesn't matter what the first one is to affect the second one. So I have all four possibilities, but only one of them has what I want. So what my probability, and we call that the probability of the event, would be 1/4, because there's one possible outcome that's what I want over the four possible outcomes of the sample space. So let's write that out kind of as a definition. If an event E has N of E equally likely, that's very important, equally likely outcomes, and its sample space, remember that's all the possible things, has N of S equally likely outcomes, the probability of event E is given by P of E is equal to the number of outcomes of the event divided by the number of outcomes of the sample space. Now, pay attention to this equally likely. They have to be equally likely. It messes everything up if it's not equally likely. So, when you have an event, you list out your sample space, pick which events are the ones that fall into the category you're looking for, and you can figure out its probability by taking the number of times the event happens divided by the number of times the sample space happens. Now, one thing that you need to realize is that the probability always is between 0 and 1. If the probability is 0, that means it is impossible. If the probability is 1, that means it's certain. It's definitely going to happen. This is like saying 100% chance. So your probability is always going to be a fraction between 0 and 1. If you have multiple probabilities, like for example with our coin toss, if we said the probability of having heads, we said was 1/4 of both them being heads was 1/4. We said the probability, let's specify that. We said and then we could figure out the probability of them both being tails, which would be 1/4 as well. And then the probability would be of one head and one tail would be 2/4, because there were two of those that happened. And then you notice that since we got all our possibilities, 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 2/4, that equals 1. And that should happen every time. If you add up all the probabilities of events in your sample space, it should equal 1 every time. So this is kind of the definition of how to get probabilities, and you need to make sure you remember it has to be between 0 and 1.